Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Matt. Welcome to the Sin Bin, the YouTube hockey channel where we talk about everything hockey. So, the other day, I was surfing the internet like I usually do, and I stumbled across this photo next to me. It's a photo of Patrick Kane on the cover of NHL21 for Xbox. Now, usually with these photoshops of the cover athletes, they're very amateurish, they're not very well done, they obviously look fake. When I look at this one, it looks absolutely real. I mean, the Photoshop, the coloring, the scheming, everything about it, it looks very real. And I personally thought it was real for a moment. And then I thought it might be a little bit too early to be announcing the cover athlete for NHL 21. So I eventually found out, to no surprise really, that it was a fake. But nevertheless, it got me thinking, who do I think will be the next cover athlete for NHL 21? Because this past year, NHL 20, Austin Matthews, everyone I ask, you either really like that cover or you really hated it. I personally can't stomach it. And I'm not just saying that because I don't like the Maple Leafs or I'm not necessarily a Maple Leafs fan. I just think that overall the aesthetics of it doesn't really look good. So, when I'm going to do this video, I'm sort of going to give you guys a history of my love-hate relationship with the NHL games. I'm going to give you guys a whole history, how it started, what the games mean to me, and then in the second part of the video, if you will, that's when we're going to be speculating who's going to be the next NHL 21 cover athlete. A lot of people don't care about the cover athlete. They just say, "Give me the games. I want to play the games. I could care less who's on the cover." For me, it's something I've always liked because I like looking at these covers. I just lay them out on my desk and I put them there sort of for decoration. And I do really collect them. I'm a collector when it comes to the NHL game. So I am interested at the very least who is the cover athletes. And in the last part of the video, I put out a bunch of polls on YouTube and on Twitter and on Discord asking you guys who do you want to see on the NHL 21 cover, and I'm going to give my viewers' opinions, and I'm going to feature some of my viewers. So make sure to stick around for that. I understand there's a lot of people that don't like video games, to which this video is going to be kind of useless for them, but you can still stick around because I won't mince any words. I'm going to give you guys every little bit of information I can. So without further ado, when I was really young, this was back in 2008, so I was like maybe 10, 11, 12 years old in that vicinity. I'm not going to do the math off the top of my head, but for some reason, my parents never let me have a PlayStation or an Xbox. But having a Wii, that was okay. So the first console I've ever had was a Nintendo Wii. I don't understand why they wouldn't let me have a PlayStation, which for my money, that was my first choice. I think they thought the Wii was less violent or something like that, but they never let me have a PlayStation. And if you guys didn't know, for the longest time, and it actually may still be the case. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but back in the day, EA didn't make their NHL games for Wii. Okay, Wii wasn't an HD console. It didn't have an HDMI. I think it still had the red, yellow, white things. So they didn't make any on the Wii. With that being said, a lot of people are too young to remember, but there was another company called 2K, NHL 2K. And this was my first NHL game. It was Christmas at my uncle's house, and I was just praying to get an NHL game. I couldn't get the EA, but that was okay. I would take the second best because I was that eager to play the NHL games. And I had a gift. It pretty much had the size and proportions of an NHL disc. And I just prayed it wasn't like a crappy DVD of Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium or something like that. I just prayed that it was an NHL disc. And to my grand happiness, it actually was. If you guys can't see it, that is Rick Nash on the cover, and he's wearing a uniform of the Columbus Blue Jackets. So that's how old this disc is. But nevertheless, I was really happy, and I remember after we opened the gifts, we sort of had dinner and dessert and that type of things. And I couldn't even eat. I was so excited to play this. And in case you guys don't know me, for me to not eat that's something. That is something. But I was so excited. The minute we went home, I popped this bad boy in my Wii, and I could not stop playing it, quite literally. Numerous hours went into this game, and when I look back at it, it's not a very good looking game. It has aged quite horribly. It has all of those standard modes, the shootout, the sort of season mode, the play now, that type of stuff. And while I did have a lot of fun when I was a kid, I do understand why later on the 2K NHL games did go out of business. I think NHL 2K11 was the last one. I think Kessler was on that cover. Later on, it was only an EA exclusive. But that didn't matter because when I was around 15 years old, my parents did eventually get me a PlayStation. And my first NHL game on the PlayStation, PS3 to be specific, was NHL 13, Claude Giroux on the cover. Now, love Claude Giroux, hate Claude Giroux. I understand he's a very polarizing player, especially if you're a Pittsburgh Penguins fan or something like that. I personally like Claude Giroux. But putting all of those thoughts aside, putting the opinions aside, I think that it's subjectively a very nice cover. I mean, his pose, the coloring scheme, the way the clouds in the background are gray, it really makes that orange stand out. There's a little splatter of paint here on the sides. I think it's a very beautiful cover. Maybe I'm being biased because it's my first NHL game on PlayStation. So I do have a lot of memories when it comes to this, but I think that objectively speaking, this is a beautiful cover. Later on, we got to NHL 14, which in case you guys don't know, I was buying them each year. Like I said, I was a collector at that point and I was just getting them each year. NHL 14 featured Martin Brodeur, and it was the first time in forever that we had a goalie on the cover. If you guys don't remember, this was a pretty controversial year because this was Martin Brodeur, the cover athlete, was decided through a vote. The reason I put the word vote in quotation marks is because, in case you guys don't remember, we later found out that this was a rigged vote. NHL 14, this was the year that Sergei Bobrovsky had an outstanding, unreal year with the Columbus Blue Jackets, and he won the Vezina. And I remember in the vote where basically EA had the fans vote who they wanted to see on the cover, Sergei Bobrovsky made it into the final with Martin Brodeur. Now, let me just say this. I like Martin Brodeur. For my money, I think he's the second greatest goalie who's ever laced them up, behind maybe Patrick Roy. I think he's an absolute legend. But with all of that being said, come around 2013 or 14 when this game was released, he was way past his prime. As a matter of fact, he was much closer to retirement than he was to his prime. I think in the game, he was only like an 82 rating or an 83. So it was kind of surprising to me that the fans, and a lot of those fans are very young, they probably didn't see Martin Brodeur play in his prime. It was surprising for me that they would vote him in. And it was later leaked, it was released that these votes are all a scam. They're not real. The winners decided way ahead of time. And the vote is basically just a marketing ploy. So in the later years, I think with NHL 16, this whole vote business ended. But with that being said, there was NHL 15. If anyone knows anything about me, I'm not the biggest Boston Bruins fan, but I do think that this cover is absolutely gorgeous too. That same sort of grayish clouds in the background, and I think his pose is really good. You know, he's all crouched up, he looks cool. Then we got to NHL 16. Now, the bad news is that I lost NHL 16. The good news is, though, I lost NHL 16 because, in my opinion, this is the worst NHL cover. In case you guys don't remember, it was actually supposed to be Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews on the cover. It was supposed to be both of them, and I think that was the first time there was to be two cover athletes. But that's not really what bothered me. It's more the fact that their pose, it doesn't really look cool. They're not mid-action or anything like that. They're just holding the Stanley Cup. Their gloves are off. They don't have any helmets. They have baseball caps. They look all sweaty because they just finished playing a really intense game. So me, it's more so the aesthetics of it, the pose, and it overall looks very blurry. Now, later on, Patrick Kane was dropped from the cover because there were some allegations towards him. I'm not really going to go into that, but it was just Jonathan Toews. But nevertheless, I still think that it remained a very hideous cover. And even as a kid, I looked at it and I was like, what the hell is this? But that doesn't matter because they came back big in NHL 17 with an absolutely stunning cover. Vladimir Tarasenko, who I think that overall people really like him. He's not a polarizing figure like a Pique Subban, which we'll see in the later years, or Austin Matthews or anything like that. NHL 18, I also lost it, but it was Connor McDavid, you know, greatest player in the NHL right now. An absolutely beautiful cover. Then we get to Pique Subban, NHL 19. Now, this was the year where they decided to put those solid colors in the background. And obviously, being with the Nashville Predators, they went with a solid orangey yellowish color. And the next year, Austin Matthews playing for the Leafs, I think logic would dictate they would put a solid blue color, but no, they put a purple one. I hate this color. I absolutely hate it. I think he looks like what's his name? Beavis from Beavis and Butthead. And just his pose, it looks weird. He's not mid-action. It looks like it's at a whistle or something. It looks like he's prepping for a face-off. And just that smile, those teeth, sends shivers down my spine. I don't like NHL 20. But that's pretty much my history of collecting the NHL games. For the EA games, it goes all the way back to NHL 13. But with all that being said, how did I like the game? So obviously as a kid, I really liked it. One game mode that I always really liked and that always intrigued me was the Be a Pro mode. And that's always one thing I like to do, building your own player, celebrating, scoring a goal, being drafted by teams. I think it was always a dream of mine to play in the NHL. Unfortunately, I don't have the physique for it and I don't have the skill for it. But being able to play it virtually, it gave me a sort of a compensation, and it was the second best alternative, I guess. But later through the years, one of the biggest criticism that NHL fans would give EA, who, mind you, they're not a beloved company whatsoever, but one of the biggest criticisms was that from year to year, it seemed like a $60 roster change, a $60 roster update, if you will. And what that means is that there wasn't much features added going from, for instance, NHL 14 to NHL 15, which, coming to think of it, NHL 15, the one with Patrice Bergeron, that was one of the games where they had the less new features. That was the year where they were transitioning to the PS4. And it was very apparent that they were caught up in the whole transition and they didn't add anything new. But there's some other years, for example, going from 17 to 18, I think they did a really big leap and added a lot of great features. NHL 3s is one of the features that they added, which I really, really like. So I sort of have a love-hate relationship with the NHL games. And obviously EA, you're going to get those microtransactions. You're going to get the Hockey Ultimate Team, all of that type of stuff, which I'm sure my dad and his credit card weren't a fan of. But anyway, that's sort of my love-hate relationship with the NHL games. I wanted to speculate who was going to be on the NHL cover. And I wanted to do more than just give my personal opinion. Who would I like to see? Because I think for the NHL cover, what makes the best cover and the best cover athletes is a figure that's universally beloved by hockey fans. I remember back in the day, before he was a Toronto Maple Leafs, which I think now he's more polarizing, but back in the day, everyone liked John Tavares when he was with the Islanders. I said for NHL 14-15, he would be the best type of cover athlete because it took a special kind of serial killer to not like John Tavares. Now that he's with the Leafs and he's getting paid $10 million, I see why he can get under people's skin, mine's included. But my point is, to have a really good cover, I think that one thing is you need to please all of the fans because you're going to get fans of the Bruins, of the Canadiens, of the Avalanche, of the Red Wings, all of these rivalry fans. They're going to be playing the game. So you don't want someone who's going to totally be polarizing. In my opinion, Austin Matthews, he was a polarizing type. Now, does that mean you can't put any polarizing type players? Absolutely not. But with that being said, I wouldn't put two polarizing players 2 years in a row. I'm saying the word polarizing a lot. I'm going to stop. So for me, you have to have a universally beloved player. But it was more than just giving my opinion. I wanted to accurately, with science, try to predict, pinpoint, who would EA put on their cover? So I tried going back to the past athletes, and we talked all the way back going to Claude Giroux. In case you guys don't know, before that, Steven Stamkos was the cover athlete of 12. 11 was Taze, 10 was Kane, 9 was Phaneuf, 8 was Stahl, 7 was Ovi, 6 was LeCavalier, 5 was Naslin, 4 was Sakic. That was another controversial year because it was actually supposed to be Danny Heatley, but he was involved in a very controversial car accident. So to avoid all of that, they decided to put Joe Sakic instead. Not a bad replacement whatsoever. Iginla was 03. 02 was Mario Lemieux. 01 was Owen Nolan. 2000 was Pronger. 99 was Lindros. 98 was Forsberg. 97 was Van Beesbrook. And 96 was Scott Stevens. There might be some before that, but that's as far as I will go, just to give you guys a little representation. So in order to accurately, scientifically pinpoint who's going to be the next cover athlete, I tried looking for a trend, and unfortunately, there's not really any trend when it comes to these cover athletes, except I wouldn't say it's a trend, but I will say EA, who I'm assuming they're an American company there, they really like their Canadian athletes. They really do. Now, that might be because Canadians are, for my money, the best players in the world. You might disagree with me. You might say Russians or Americans. For my money, and maybe I'm being biased because I'm Canadians, I think that Canadian players are the best player in the world, which would stand to reason why they're most oftentimes on the cover. But if you look at that list that I just named, which coming to think of it, maybe I should have made an image. There is a trend in that a Canadian athlete has never gone more than 1 year without being on the cover. You have to go back to 98, 97, in which it was Forsberg, a Swedish player, and Van Beesbrook, a US player. That was the only time a Canadian player has gone more than 1 year without being on the cover. So, for my money, given that Austin Matthews was on this past year and he's an American player, I think that the next player, it's safe to say that it might be a Canadian player. I think it's going to be a Canadian player. Now, who do I want to see? Going back to that universally loved player, a guy like Nathan MacKinnon. I don't think anyone hates him. I guess maybe if you're historically they have a rivalry with the Red Wings. So I guess if you're a Red Wings fan, you might not really like him. But it's not really because of Nathan MacKinnon. It's more so because of the team he plays on. I think if you look at his style of play, he's an explosive player. He might be the second most talented player in the whole NHL. I think he is. I think it's time we have Nathan MacKinnon on the cover. So that's who I think will be on the cover. Like I said, I did put numerous polls out there where I asked my viewers on Twitter over here. I put a lot of different options. So here's the Patrick Kane cover that I started off with. There's also a Seth Jones one. Now, Seth Jones is one of the brightest defensemen in the NHL, one of the brightest, youngest defensemen. And I think that this cover, not only would it make sense to put Seth Jones, I think that this Photoshop is really well done. So a little pat on the back on whoever made this. There's also Colby Cave. That's an interesting one. And I don't think it's very far off because Colby Cave, that's the guy who unfortunately passed away tragically from a brain bleed. A lot of people would like to see him on the cover, not necessarily because he's a superstar, not necessarily because he scores a bunch of goals, but just sort of out of respect for the player's family and the player himself, posthumously at least. I wouldn't mind seeing Colby Cave. I mean, he's not the greatest hockey player, or he wasn't the greatest hockey player, but just like I said, out of respect. And also, this Photoshop job is really well done. And then another one, Alex Ovechkin. I don't think that the cover is as well made in terms of Photoshop, but he would be an interesting athlete to have, especially him chasing down Gretzky's goal record. I know we did have him back in '07, but EA is no strangers to having two athletes on the cover back to back. So what I was trying to say, I also have Discord. On Discord, I asked the question. Joe92 says Crosby. He would like to see Crosby. Fedge says a combo of Elias Peterson, Brock Besser, or Quinn Hughes hits all of the marks. Canadian team, young international stars, and an American player. He would also like to see Marc-Andre Fleury. And those players would wear the 90s Canucks jersey. That would be awesome. I would like to see it. Say an Elias Peterson with that black, yellow, and red Canucks jersey. I think that would be absolutely awesome. I think I put one last poll on YouTube here. On YouTube, I put out a poll, and I did put up a few options. 59% would like to see Nathan MacKinnon. 14% say Pasternak. 14% say Panarin. 9% say John Carlson. John Carlson, I would love to see him. I think he's a very underrated player. Rometta Clan says, I picked MacKinnon, although Pasternak and Panarin would be good too. And Open Ice Hits with Scotty2 Hockey, who, by the way, if you guys don't follow him, he's a very, very good channel. And he just had a newborn kid, so congratulations. He says Draisaitl gets my vote. Obviously, Connor McDavid was on recently, who was with the Oilers. But what I was trying to say before is that they're no strangers to putting the same team back to back. So we saw back in 2010, 2011, they put Kane and then Taves two Chicago Blackhawks. So the fact that an Edmonton Oiler was on in 2018, I don't think that that's the end of the world. On Twitter, I also asked the question, and I have a few replies here. If I could pull it out. GB said, I already told you my picks nerd. He's an Avalanche fan. He wants to see McKinnon. I don't give a Chuck says, I think it'll probably be Pasternak. So a lot of great answers. I would like to thank everyone for participating, and I would like to thank everyone for listening to this very long-winded video. I'm running out of gas here, but that doesn't matter, because if you do like hockey content, make sure to like this channel. Make sure to subscribe. I try to put out videos whenever I can. I know it's been a little bit harder lately with the NHL season being down. There's not a lot of content to talk about, but I'm still trying to find content here and there like today. So make sure to subscribe. Make sure to join the Discord, which we talked about previously. I'll put the link in the description. And with all that being said, my name is Matt. Keep your stick on the ice.